Hello, everyone, and welcome to Point of Purchase by Geekspeak Commerce. On this show, we gather with experts in the e-commerce ecosystem to talk about all things retail, technology, business strategy, and so much more. My name is Trisha Williams, and I'm the managing partner at Geekspeak Commerce, and I'm going to be your host for today. Now, in this episode of Point of Purchase, we're digging into one of the fastest growing e-commerce categories in Canada, the pet category. And I have to admit, I did not know how much Canadians love their pets. According to Stats Canada, about 39.5% of Canadian households own at least one cat, at least one, and 38.1% own at least one dog. And bear in mind, there are some households that have multiple pets. And in addition, millions of households also have birds, fish, small mammals, or reptiles. So altogether, nearly 60% of Canadian households own a pet. That's huge. I had no idea the numbers were so high. So I am included in the 38.1% of homes with a dog. I think I've got some pictures of my guy here. His name is Hank. They should be coming up on screen. There he is. That's Hank Williams Jr. He's an American bulldog. And I know he looks like a tough guy, but he is such a sweetheart. That's a puppy picture. So I finally have a reason to share some pictures of my dog. So there he is. That's my guy. So because we love our pets so much, we tend to spend a lot of money on them. Admittedly, I do. I'm guilty of it. From food to grooming to toys and so much more. The pet supplies industry in Canada is growing rapidly. And according to Pet Valu, the Canadian pet industry spend reached 13.7 billion in 2024, with a compound annual growth rate of 8% from 2016. Now, Canadian pet owners have some distinct behaviors, and selling pet-related products comes with its own set of challenges, but also opportunities. So joining me to talk about all of this and more is Tanbir Grover, Chief Marketing and Digital Officer at Pet Valu. Tanbir, hello.
Hey, Trisha, we finally did it.
We did it. Thank you so much for making it.
My pleasure.
Probably got sick of us trying to track you down to have you join us on the show, but I'm glad we ran into each other a couple months ago.
Yeah, no, me too. And it's something that I've definitely wanted to do, and I'm glad we all made it happen today.
In fairness, though, the first time I approached you, I think it was during the pandemic, so you may have had your hands full a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I just joined Pet Valu during the pandemic too, so I think I was still trying to figure out my own cycle of work and what was involved, the industry itself, as you sort of, we're I guess you had some new knowledge as part of your preparation for this. I also went through that same process of like, oh my God, this industry is a big industry.
Absolutely. And you know what? I don't like going back to pandemic times, but thinking about this whole thing triggered some memories because I remember, obviously we know all about the explosive growth in grocery, but specifically in the pet gap category, we saw some incredible growth as well. And I even remember it being on the news, the Toronto Humane Society had a huge wait list for pet adoption and they had to cap it at 10,000 people. Yeah. What did that look like on your end at Pet Valu?
Well, it's hard, it's really hard to say. I mean, what we did see was obviously what is happening in the industry. We saw more humanization, more premiumization occurring. Humanization in that we treat our pets like they are family. And I think part of what you saw in COVID was we started becoming a little bit, unfortunately, more insular, where we had to be bound to home.
Yeah.
And part of the companionship that you get, and you see that with Hank, is he's a friend. Right? He's somebody you hang out with. He's somebody that you play with. And there's this interaction that happens. And I think there's this joy that you get out of being a pet parent. And I think over COVID, when you're looking for those moments of joy, people did turn to pets, to cure their loneliness, to cure what I would call just having connection in a deeper, sort of more meaningful relationship with others around them. The households, had sort of shrunk a little bit. Like, I think about myself, like it was hard to see my parents. It was hard to see my sibling. Now you sort of, you do this householding thing of we're going to bring a pet in and we're going to do it. And then you think about what's happened then. We also all work from home. So having a pet at home while you're working from home made working from home a little bit more palatable, I hope. Absolutely. So, part of it was how do we sort of go into this realm of pet ownership where I think one of the things of COVID really showed us was humans desire companionship, humans desire company, and part of that in relationships. And we were at the right point in our vertical really to help support that and continue to
Yeah,
support that.
absolutely. They definitely became support animals. They were so important in the household for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Tanbir, I know that you also have a dog, and I think we have some pictures.
Yeah,
So
I'll
it's
tell you a
recent.
bit. This is Levi. We ended up getting Levi in 2023, so he is 2 years old. So a little bit after the pandemic. I also have young kids, so I was trying to balance what was happening with the kids and also
Oh,
with the dog. So this is
yeah,
my family. A couple of years ago, our last year at the sunflower fields, where we took Levi for a photo
amazing.
shoot, and yeah. So the kids are at this point 6 and or 7 and 4, I believe. So here they are again, Christmas, probably one of Levi's last Christmas last year where we all got together. And now you can see he's part of the family. He's included in the family photos. He's part of what we
So
try
cute.
to posture and do. And he's a great dog. Like I have to say, when I'm working, sometimes I'll find him right beside me, just hanging out and chilling. There's times when he's, my kids are, maybe not in a great place when they come home from school. And here he is wagging his tail, ready to greet them and ready for all the hugs they're going to give him and all the love they're going to give him. And he's fit in so well into our family that I feel very blessed that we've had such a great
Oh,
experience.
love that. And he's a Labradoodle, right?
Labradoodle, yeah, 2-year-old Labradoodle. And in fact, the fun story here is my sister-in-law also has a Labradoodle who's his brother. So when we do get
Oh,
together, the two of them get to hang out and play, and there's a lot of love, with brotherly love, that gets expressed as a result.
love that. That's amazing. All right. So before we get carried away with talking about our dogs,
Yeah,
I do want to remind everybody that if you have questions for Tanbir or myself, you can feel free to drop them in the comment section wherever you're tuning in from, and we'll try to get to them before we wrap up today. So let's dive in here, Tanbir. Now, you've been working in the digital space for a long time now, and you're
yeah.
well known in Canada for the roles that you've occupied. Can you share a little bit about your background with our viewers, and also tell us more about your role as Chief Marketing and Digital Officer at Pet Value?
For sure. So, um, thank you for the warm compliment of being a core member of ecom. I feel like I was part of the early days of e-commerce
Yes.
in Canada, which is what really helped. I like to say that I joined ecom just at the time the iPhone first came out. So just to help date myself a little bit, but also I remind people that when I joined ecom, Amazon was purely a bookstore. It had nothing else but purely books. So I kind of go back in my career, and a lot of the time, to your point, has been spent in the ecom digital space. A lot of that has been through, the likes of Sears Canada, where I really learned the e-commerce space on the back
Mhm.
catalog business, given how big the catalog business was for Sears. I then went into Hudson's Bay to go work on the e-com merchandising side of it. And I really, really enjoyed that. Like I really started finding a groove in that e-com space and really learning it, where I finally got, I think, the biggest and most pivotal opportunity, which was joining Lowe's Canada at a time when they did not have an e-commerce site. And I was hired to help launch the e-commerce site, build a team from ground up, and also launch digital marketing alongside of that and sort of get that all going. So I did all of that work, transcended for almost 8 years at Lowe's, and took on some ownership of the Rona business, as well as we had acquired Rona. And then did a brief hiatus at Cooperators for 10 months as part of just trying to try something new. But Pet Value knocked on the door and said, "Hey, Tanbir, we're really looking for somebody to kind of come help on the e-com side and the marketing side, and we want you." And my first reaction was, "Well, I'm not the traditional marketer. Like I'm more of a digital marketer.
Yep.
How you want to, just want to make sure you guys understand it." They're like, "We understand it. We really want somebody who's got the digital marketing acumen, can help sort of navigate through the digital transformation that we're trying to go through here, especially with our franchisee model, and at the same time help the organizational shift to what I would call more of a modern sort of style of marketing at the time." And a lot of that was then, "Hey, you can do this, and you can hire the right team to support you to build this, so you have all the tools and capabilities at your hands to make this happen." So ultimately, I feel like I was asked to go step up to home plate and go for a home run. Feel like I stepped up at home plate. I'm still on base. Maybe I hit a home run, maybe I didn't. Like sometimes you do it, but if I think about my time at Pet Value today and where it's at, I definitely have reached base many times and probably come home a couple of times too as a result.
No, that's amazing. You are definitely one of the pioneers in the e-com space, especially in Canada. And we've had the opportunity to work with you in a few different places as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
appreciate that relationship
Yeah.
so much. And just so you know, you've been described as a legend to me in this space. So you're definitely well known. And again,
Very lucky. Again, like I said, very lucky to be in the space. Very lucky to have made so many good friends and colleagues. And one of the beauties of living in Canada is it is a small, tight network on the retail side, and then it gets even tighter on the e-commerce side. And I've been surrounded by lots of people who I've had the pleasure of both leading, but being led by, who have also been, instrumental in my career, but also instrumental in helping me see things from different angles and different diversity points that have really helped shape me for sure.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, what makes e-commerce in the pet category sort of uniquely challenging or opportunistic compared to the other retail verticals that you just touched on.
When I think about it, the pet category first is an emotional category. It's one, it's generally a happy category too. So, part of it, the marketing angle that I love about it is, it's emotional and it's loving.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my Lowe's home improvement experience and say, maybe it was emotional, definitely, but it didn't always have the happy emotion. Sometimes it was like my water heater's busted. There's a leak in my roof. Oh my God, my appliance doesn't work. So there's a little bit more of the negative connotation of the trip and the reasons for the trip.
Sure.
And now I'm thinking about the pet category, where it also happens is the pet category can become a recurring purchase. You have to feed your pet. So as a result, it becomes a bit of a grocery style purchase with an emotion attached to it. Unfortunately, our pets don't talk to us. So sometimes going to the local pet store actually helps serve a couple of purposes. One is it can be, in our model, it can be a quick in and out trip. I know what I want, I'm going to get it, and I'm going to be super efficient. Or it can be, I can take my dog, in this case, Levi, to the pet store, and I can give him an experience while I shop. Or it could be, hey, I want to go because I'm having a problem. Either my cat, my dog, my bird, my rabbit, whatever it may be. Something's not right, and I need advice. I need some level of consolation. I need some level of consultation. I need somebody to help me out, kind of thing. And if you think about all of those different things, those are things where we play in such different ways because it takes things from different industries and brings it together, right? Consultative. At home improvement, I thought a lot of things were consultative, right? We're trying to make sure we give you the right product, give you tips and tricks. That's where it is. When you think about fashion, it's like, do I look good? So it's an emotional attachment of if I feel I look good, then I look good, right? That's where it goes. And we're kind of playing in all of those notions. And what kind of gives it all what makes it all come together is we at least know we have to earn the repeat trip, what I call the monthly trip. We have to really make sure we deliver on the customer experience to continuously earn that monthly trip from our customers. Now, if you think about a lifetime value, we could have up to 12 trips a year. Our dogs, let's assume just for simple math, they live for 10 years. That's 120 trips that we're talking about. Those 120 trips is the lifetime value. But here's the logic. In my lifetime, I actually may have 2 or 3 pets. Same with you. So now you know that's almost going to be 300 to 400-ish trips.
That's a lot of trips. Yeah.
If you sort of think about it, this is why it's so important for us at Pet Value to have the model of the customer experience at the forefront, providing expertise, providing compassion, right? Being conveniently located so we can actually win that monthly trip every single time.
Absolutely. And you touched on a lot of great points there. You're talking about the emotion behind it, your pet being a part of your family. And when I think about food, things like supplements and things of that nature, a lot of pet owners spend quite a bit of time doing research. How are you facilitating that online for your customers?
Yeah. It's a great point. And part of what we're trying to do is a number of things. We've actually increased since I've joined, we've probably published now over 100 content articles on petvalue.ca. One of the early ones I remember that we published was how to people return back to work with their pets at home. Like, what's involved in helping train, facilitate, handle the anxiety that you as a pet parent feel, but also the pet's going to feel when there's no longer you at home, when they've been so used to you being home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moving with pets is another great example. You move, as humans, we think, okay, moving complicated, it's tough. It's also tough for our pets. So, we've taken positions that allow us to showcase our expertise, our skill set. And we continue to do that, especially as we sort of think more about where is that content going to live and how do we make sure it comes to life. We leverage our ACEs, who are animal care experts in our store. They create content for us, especially around health and nutrition. So
Right.
things like what we're feeding, what are the right supplements to think about. Unfortunately, the category is a complicated category. It's not so simple. And this is why the model really works of how do we drive expertise in our store format and how do we drive some of that expertise in our online format so there's
Right.
synergy. We want to be the credible source for that information. And now, Trisha, as you know how AI is playing into this. We're also trying to make sure we're AI. I would call it getting ready for the answer engine optimization that's about to occur as well. Which is, instead of me asking these questions, I'm just going to go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot to really ask those questions and expect.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we make sure we've got the right sort of content to help deliver that credibility back so that we are the trusted place for our devoted pet lovers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI is so topical, and we're going to dig into that more
We
a
will.
little
Yeah,
bit later on.
sure we
But
will.
yeah. So I wanted to touch on something before we get there, though. You worked at Sears, the Bay, Lowe's.
Yeah.
Um, you brought a lot of knowledge and experience with you to Pet Value. But have you uncovered something new in the pet category that you didn't quite expect?
Yeah. It's. I would say the emotional connection and the deep emotional connection really struck me.
Mm-hmm.
The compassion of our people really struck me. Like, it's. I never, I think you think about it as it is, but until you're in the ecosystem and you're actually interacting with it, you realize how important a role we play in the lives of a devoted pet lover and their pet.
Mm-hmm.
What I've also realized is, the things that I've learned at Sears, Bay, and Lowe's, those are good fundamental pieces of the puzzle of like how do you sell merchandise? How do you do the marketing around it? But I think the biggest thing that I've kind of been able to do here is having the intersection of both the digital and traditional side, the e-commerce side, and the engineering side. That's been something special for me because it's now sort of like when I want something, I also know that I can do it. And I only have myself to look in the mirror and say, hey, if you're not doing enough on the traditional side, why not? And if you remember back in the day in the digital space, we used to carve out the budget and be like, okay, digital, you go do your thing. Traditional, you go do your thing. And we'd hope the two things would add up to be a
Yep.
great network effect. I think the evolution of why this is a marketing and digital officer role is you have both sides of the table, and it can't be here, you go do this and you go do that. It's where are we going to make the most money? Where's the right best business decision to make? How do we do that? And that's something that I didn't really realize all of that until I got here and I had the full capability of the role and said, wow, I actually have it from end to end and I have it from top
Yep.
to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have that entire customer experience in my envelope versus before where I only really focus on the digital side of the business.
Absolutely. I think that transition to omni-channel is finally happening. We've been
Yeah.
talking about it for a long time in the industry, and
Yeah.
seems like it's finally happening. And I don't know, maybe we're closer to dropping the E from e-commerce and just calling it commerce because,
Yeah.
it's all tied together. So,
Yeah, I think part of what's happening as well is it's also because our customers are expecting that, right? It's not just us that are doing it. It's customers expect a seamless, frictionless shopping experience. They want to know that what I'm doing online can be represented in store and vice versa. What I'm doing in store should be represented online. And in fact, how you craft that omni experience is I think is where the next sort of foray of e-commerce and digital and what I would call sort of the commerce side of the business is really going to go is how do they blend together, but
mhm,
also play off the powerful attributes. Like, a powerful attribute still is the in-store experience, the dialogue, the discussion, the feeling of human connection, right?
sure.
There's the convenience connection of online, and I can get it fast. I can do things I need to. I'm busy, right? And I think both of them coupled together can offer a greater customer experience and a more aligned brand experience that drives that stickiness.
Absolutely. Continuity is important. You can't
Yeah,
have completely different experiences online versus in store. So,
correct.
absolutely agree. Now, you talked about your aces in store, and I
Mhm.
know that, Pet Value has always leaned into community focus and proudly positioning itself as being very local. How does that show up in your digital and marketing strategies today?
Yeah, I think it shows up a lot. Like I'll give you some good examples.
Sure.
We're a Canadian company. We're Canadian owned and locally operated. So we both have our franchisees owning a store and operating that store, and we have corporate stores with local store managers from the community operating. And one of the things, obviously, as we've seen with the U.S. and the 51st state and all the stuff that's coming from south of the border, we saw that as a great opportunity to kind of lean in and tell our local story. So that's one area at the national level. Then, if you think about it on more on the localized level, we actually do partner with a lot of rescues and shelters alongside our stores. So, in terms of adoption events, in terms of fundraising, what we've really tried to do to really drive that local flavor is allow for our stores to find a local partnership. Like, it could be the Toronto Cat Rescue, it could be in my neighborhood, the Etobicoke Cat Rescue type of thing.
Right.
And what we do is the stores will partner with them and raise funds for them. And dollar for dollar, those funds that are raised by our devoted pet lovers and the store go right back to those rescues and shelters. So from that feeling of impact, it's different when you do something at the national level and the money you raise goes nationally because you don't really know where it ends up in Canada. But when
It's
you do
true.
it locally and you say, hey, this is going to impact the local shelter in your neighborhood, people really gravitate towards that. They really like that concept of I'm helping something local in my neighborhood. So we kind of play on that. And then we also get involved in like local events, local fundraising opportunities, local, even like localized in-store events where we'd be like, hey, we're going to do a nail clipping day. Come on in for nail clips. Hey, we're going to do a little bit like of a learn about betta fish today and, come in and learn about betta fish. So we try different things to really drive that community sense of why we exist. And because we're such a convenient location, we can fill the community need as a result of that too.
Absolutely. And you're right. I think that, having that local aspect just is a huge driver. It's, when you donate to anything, oftentimes you think this organization is so huge. I don't know where my
Yeah,
$5 or $10 or $1 is going. But if you can point to that, dog shelter or whatnot in your community, that makes such a big difference.
yeah, and what we get to do, we're proud of what we do, but we also want to tell people, like, part of marketing is not necessarily doing it with an ego, so still being humble about the impact we can have, because our
Yeah,
stores should be proud. Our head office, our TCs, all of our ACEs should be proud of the work we do in our communities. So a great example in June, and we just released the results, I think, earlier this week, is in June we do a lot of this local fundraising. We call it Pet Appreciation Month. So we ask each store to do that partnership, raise funds. I think the last number I looked at, we raised over 1.4 million
wow.
in food donations and product donations and in cash donations that will be repatriated back. So, when you think about it, maybe only that store that I am connected to only did 1,500 to 3,000 bucks, but across a network of 700 plus stores, that adds up very quickly to
For
what we
sure.
can do as a national impact at a local level.
Hmm. That's amazing. Congratulations. That's a
Thank you.
huge accomplishment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the pet category, it's a
Yeah.
little unique, right? From when we're purchasing for humans or others in our family. What does the typical shopper journey look like for a pet parent? And, how does that affect strategy in store and online?
Yeah. So, let's start from the simplest example of like, I'm thinking of a pet. I'm just deciding that I want a pet.
Mhm.
We want to be, we already want you to think of pet value in that case, right? We want to be able to be in that, we'll call it think set of, hey, pet value is the place to go to learn about it, to sort of do it. And then really where our model comes into play is you'll come online, you'll do some research, maybe you'll read an article about it. There's things that we still want to do and develop, but eventually we hope and we know that you'll likely come to our pet store to experience our pet store in that first journey of like, I'm getting a puppy. And usually that experience is filled with, if you haven't had a pet before, usually it's filled with some level of, I don't know, I'm not sure, I need help, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not like coming in and going, here's my laundry list of everything I need. If this is your first time owning a pet.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that stage and where it really is vital is, you then get introduced to an ace, and then somebody who's actually going to spend the time with you and nurture that relationship of what do you need and really help guide you in what you need to buy for your pet. Right. I remember when I first got Levi, and even though I worked at Pet Value, my first pet that I have most recency of is a fish. Not a
Yeah.
super complicated thing,
A
but at
little
the end of the
different.
day, it's still required, still like, cleaning the tank, understanding what would be needed and how to make sure, it's sort of like, the thing I'm always most afraid of, especially when the kids were young, is I don't want this fish to die because I screwed up. Right.
Right.
So you don't want those sort of lingering memories to kind of attach. So me going to Pet Value was, help me make sure I don't do anything stupid where I will actually
Right.
be feeling very, very guilty for what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And, what ends up happening is you sort of get this big sort of, hey, I need to get this, 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 and you get a lot of excitement. Like that's the fun part of it is you're genuinely happy and excited to be welcoming a new member into your household. So you're going and you're spending and you're doing things, you're learning. And then what ends up happening alongside that journey is now you're starting to what I would call understand your pet. Your pet's going through its growing pains as well. So, your cat's no longer maybe as shy. Your dog is now no longer always chewing on everything and getting out of that puppy stage. And you sort of get into this more of what I call routine building. And the
Mm-hmm.
routine building is really critical because we play an important role in that, this is where the supplements, the vitamins, the enrichments all come in. You want your pet to be, living its happiest, healthiest life. So how do you sort of do that? So those are conversations we'll still have. Then you go through another stage really where it's like this transitionary stage of like, from puppy food to adult food, and then sometimes even from adult food to senior food, right? And
Right.
in those moments too of like, how do I help with, health and wellness? How do I help with, my God, he's becoming a picky eater all of a sudden, or something's off. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I help deal with that type of stuff? And I think what people don't always realize is what we give to our pets to start with, and really, the high value of nutrition and quality of supplements and health products that we feed them is a great way to actually prevent our pets from getting sick or having medical issues down the line. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
this, still this educational piece that still happens in this space of, why is it so important to feed what we feed? Why is it so important to check the ingredient panel of what we're feeding our pets? Because truthfully is that, there's not a lot of knowledge out there. And because our pets don't talk to us, we're kind
Yes.
of, I think we're doing okay. It seems to be okay. Right. And you kind of,
Yeah.
you kind of live down that path. But, this is where we as Pet Value want to make really an impact is want to help you alongside that journey. We want to be there step by step as you go through your pet journey. And, think of it as we want to almost be like a co-pilot alongside that journey that you have as a pet owner.
Absolutely. And I think even if you have experience as a pet owner, I mean, each animal's different. And if you end up switching breeds, like I did, I had a golden doodle
Yeah.
before. Now I've got an American bulldog. Very different.
Yeah. And also, Trisha, you're absolutely right. Because even if you think about it, like you're maybe a pet that you had 10 years ago to now you have another pet, a lot happens in 10 years. A lot happens in, no longer is it this sort of staticky, easygoing sort of space. There's tons of it. Like as much as we think of innovation as technology, there's
Mm-hmm.
innovations in our food, there's innovations in toys, there's innovation in, in enrichment. There's different things that are just happening now that are helping, which I think is a great thing, is helping ensure that our pets can live as long a life as possible and as happy a life as possible.
Absolutely. No, I've bought puzzles for
Yes.
for Hank. I
Yeah.
didn't know these things existed before. So
Neither did I. But I mean, once you get it, it's kind of great. And then sometimes
yeah,
you get 2 or 3 and you kind of just interchange them and,
yeah,
it's like it's keeping them busy. But they, as much as they are active, it's keeping their mind active is really important as well.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm still waiting for him to get out of the chewing everything phase. So he's still a puppy.
Yeah. Levi got out of it by the year and a half. He was finally out of it. Otherwise, like my risers, the kids' stuffies, a number of them have been destroyed and led to lots of tears of like, why does Levi do this? To okay, we get why, and you got to put your stuff away is really the important rule.
Exactly. Well, Hank's a year and a half, so fingers crossed.
You're well on your way.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to make a hard pivot here and talk about marketing budgets.
Okay.
So how do you balance things, in between, what gets applied to, your brick and mortar versus digital? How do you navigate that when it comes around to budget time?
Yeah, so a lot of that is a couple of things, right? We have to factor in. We factor in what I would call our full 360 marketing approach is how we think of things. So, when we think about it is where do we want to invest in our brand and continuously our brand story, and how much do we want to also move and invest into what I call performance and lower end of the funnel sort of marketing driving tactical sales.
Mhm.
Now, I don't we don't drive everything to the bottom of the funnel because eventually you need to bring in new customers. You need to remind people why you exist and what's important. Brand plays a very important role of creating memory, right? And in creating this institutional memory of pet value. The performance side happens because I now know that the Pet Value is the company that sells pet stuff. I also consider it a great little pet store. Now performance actually takes place because you can actually drive that performance because you've built that sort of down the funnel line of I thought of you, I consider you, I'm willing to purchase from you. So, when we think about our budget, we kind of plan it that way and think of it that way. We don't try to think of it as like store by store or like tactic based. We kind of look at it and go, what are the key initiatives we want to drive? We want to drive a bunch of awareness in Q1, Q2, maybe have it always on going through Q3, Q4. Maybe there's some seasonal campaigns that we really want to lean into. As a great example, we leaned into Canada Day this year. And we talked about it on our earnings call. Why was that important? It was relevant because we were going through a moment, right? We were going through this Canadian proud elbows up moment. And what a great way for Pet Value to showcase the Canadiana behind us, tell about our local franchisees, our local store operators in a way that really reminds Canadians to shop Canadian and keep that going. So that was a really opportunistic play. We came through and we looked at it and we said, this lives to our ethos and what we want to do and how we want to do it. Let's make that happen. And we kind of continuously, because we're more in the digital space, we have a lot more nimbleness, which is really good too, right? We can actually react to stuff versus being and saying, hey, we committed to this. Now we're kind of stuck with it. And then we also do interesting things. Like one of the things that I'm super proud of the team for coming up with is we actually partnered with Shadow Lane magazine. So completely traditional. And we did it as part of one of their anniversary editions. And we flipped the script a bit. So Shadow Lane was the front cover and the back cover was Cattle Lane. So when you actually flipped the magazine over and turned it over, it became
cool.
And it became an important. Now it didn't drive like, oh my God, I'm going to get a ton of sales out of it, but it drove brand awareness. It drove a position. It allowed us to talk about our expertise. It allowed us what tells that we're different than the many other retailers that are out there that you can also choose to shop with. But when you hear that type of stuff, that's where people's heartstrings, and this goes back to that emotional brand. We become emotional, right? Same thing. We partnered with the Remax program. That was another really, really awesome partnership in my mind where the team said, hey, here's something where two brands can come together and collaborate. People move, pets move too. We love the local store concept. How do we introduce the new homeowner to the new local pet store? Let's try to figure that out, right? So again, these are the ways that marketing is always trying to intersect, not just on brand and not just on bottom line performance, but how do we mesh the two together to do at the same time?
I love that. I think, the question was around budgets, but it always seems to circle back to sort of that emotional connection with your animal as well.
Listen, every marketer is governed by a budget, right? We want to spend more than we have. We'd love to. We know there's way more opportunities to get out there. But I also think, as leaders, and especially in the marketing realm, in the digital realm, we've dealt with constraints before. Digital's always dealing with constraints, especially early in my career where, we could have spent way more than we were given, but we had to prove, we had to show. And I think a lot of what we try to do is do some test and learns, really try to lean into what can we glean out of something so we can make the next decision, right? So maybe in the cases, we've tested something on, we did some testing on Prime back in holiday last year. It led to some really good results, which meant that we leaned into the Prime TV side in our February, March campaign around playtime. So we try to take those lessons, and for things that don't work, there's nothing wrong with it. It didn't work. It's great. Let's kind of put it on the on the back burner, and maybe we'll come back to it in 6 months or 8 months and kind of relook at it and say, does it fit again? Because again, everything, this is what I love about digital and marketing, is it can be nimble if you want it to be nimble.
100%. And you can, test and learn. I was saying to my team, that was the phrase of the year for us last year. A lot of brands, retailers wanted to test and learn, and this environment allows us to do that easily. So I agree. So what do you think are some of the, remaining gaps or challenges rather, that you see when you're trying to bring the in-store expertise in the digital environment? Like, what are we still kind of wrestling with?
I still think we're wrestling with a lot. Like, if you think about, like, how do we bring in that human connection online is a big component. Like, we've started a little bit with chat and with our customer care agents, who are all animal care certified. So they've gone through training to become animal care experts, but it's getting scale out of it. That's a challenge. I think, again, I'll give you, this is an amazing story, but also gives you sort of the epiphany of the challenge. I was in a store in Alberta really early in my career at Pet Valu, and we were in the back room talking to one of the store managers, the ace. And she says to me, Charlie's here. And I'm like, there's no security camera here right now that you're looking at, because I don't see a screen. So I don't know how you know Charlie's here. And in my head, I've thought of it as a human. But what she's actually thought is, Charlie's here because I heard the bark of Charlie from the front of the store, and I recognized the bark.
Wow.
And that was a big epiphany moment of how much knowledge is sitting in our aces' heads on who comes to our stores, who are their pets, things that, you think about and maybe this shows you the age, but if you think about Cheers in the bar, so you go into the bar and they're like, hey, everybody knows your name at this bar.
Mm-hmm.
How could we actually do that at scale, where we're not relying on a ace to have this core repository of knowledge, but they're given this like ability to be like, oh, Tanbir's here. And more importantly, Levi's here and Tanbir's the pet owner, right? Like, how do we start building a little bit of that connection? How do you, when you log into petvalu.ca, does that come to life? As just a simple example of, like, today, Levi's dad showed up. Tomorrow, Levi's mom showed up. Like, just changing that vernacular.
Absolutely.
Like, you're now going, oh my God, there's like you just hit an emotional tone.
It's very powerful.
And that's where the opportunity is for me, is how do we bring that knowledge base that's so reliant on human memory, human capacity, to actually go, how does this actually get replicated a bit online to really drive the efficacy of, we know you, and more importantly, we know your pet.
Right. No, I love that. So I think we're going to take a bit of a pause here and just remind everybody that they can drop questions in the comments section wherever they're tuning in from, and we'll get to those before the end of the show. All right. So, Tanbir, we've worked together over the years in a number of different places. So, at GeekSpeak, we know how much accurate data and strong content impacts discoverability and conversion. What's one thing you wish brands realized earlier in the onboarding and enrichment process? So the vendors that you work with, what do you wish they knew or understood?
How important just great product data, product imagery is, to invest in that and not just think of it as it's just it just helps me get listed. Because I think sometimes the notion is it's a necessary evil to show up. Mm-hmm. In today's day and age, and I've known this with you guys, and we've tried a lot of work to really improve our content, improve the imagery that's on our website, include more sort of just romantic copy even of why, because that is how customers are first interacting with your brand and your product. And I know this is not a pet example, but I'll give you a great example that we had at Lowe's, and I did this with a vendor, and I won't tell you the vendor's name. And I was like, I love everything you sell, but I never buy anything online. And the guy was like, what do you mean? I go, let's go pretend I'm in your store and I'm looking for a fridge. What's the first thing I'm going to do? And he's like, well, usually you look at it, you look at the specs, and I'm like, okay, what's the first thing I'm going to do? He's like, you're going to open it. And I'm like, that's right. But online, I don't have a picture of an open fridge. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what's behind this fridge? What do the shelves look like? How's my milk going to get stored, or my drinks going to get stored? How's all my hot sauces that I love going to get stored in repository in your fridge? And it was that moment that he was like, shoot, I actually, and this is 2012, so bear with time, but it was this idea that I need to replicate the same experience that happens in a store, that capture moment of what happens when you're talking to an ace about a product, that also needs to live online. And why it's also important, not just from a devoted pet lover customer point of view, but guess what? Our aces are also using the website as a repository to build their own knowledge, right? It's a way to validate what they know. And sometimes they also can't remember every single thing. So the website becomes a pseudo library of what we're going to do. And where this even becomes more important, and maybe this is a plug for you guys, is as we think about the agentic space, the agent space, this is where, I think you can't hope that you show up like we did with SEO. You have to have an actual plan to say, I want to show up and this is how. And it's going to start with content, because if the chat bot cannot actually, or the AI bot cannot find the content it's looking for, it will ignore your content and move on to somebody who has that content.
100%. We've been doing this for a long time too, and it's incredible what the journey has been in terms of getting vendors and retailers in some cases to understand the value of content, right?
Because,
I think
Tricia, at the end, it's expensive too.
it is.
The underlying reason of why content has been hard is it costs money, it takes effort, it takes human capital to do this stuff. But we are also at an age now where we have a lot more assistive tools to help us to get there.
Absolutely. And I think the encouraging thing too is, when we're talking about using agents with AI, I think that, the way that we've always approached creating content is that we want to leverage accurate and structured data, right? And that's what the bots are looking for. But they're also looking for benefits because they want to be able to compare or deliver results where they're comparing features and the benefit, based on the inquiry. So I think, the content has to be purposeful for sure. And it's not just romance copy.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, again, this is all things that we're trying to, again, if you go into a store, these are the questions you'd be asking. How plush is this? Is this the right size for my dog or my cat? Is this tree going to withstand the weight of the cat's paws? Again, those are the benefits that we need to really align to be able to describe them in order for the bot to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because the pet value stores tend to be smaller, and they do have the aces there that you could speak to at length, typically, to ask all these questions. But for those larger retailers that have the big box stores, oftentimes you really have to rely on the content that's online, because good luck finding a team member to help you out on the sales floor, right?
Yeah. I mean, and again, you've just hit another nail on the head of why pet value, right? Is because we're a smaller footprint, highly curated product, so we don't have everything, and that's done consciously. We just don't have the square footage space to do that. But what we want to be able to have is that interaction. We want staff to have that interaction. We want to encourage it. Like, one of the things I've always loved walking into Pet Value, because having worked in other retailers, is they kind of discourage you to spend time with the customer because they want you to move on, right? Here we don't have that notion of move on. It's if the customer, the DPL is there and you're interacting with the DPL, you're not on a clock. If you spend an hour with them, that's an hour well spent in our minds.
Absolutely. So with Pet Value following the franchise model, how do you help your franchisees adopt and understand the nature of e-com? Is that a challenge?
I think it's still a challenge. I think it's a fair challenge, because you have to, at least this was probably another epiphany at Pet Value, because I've always thought of everything from my mom's point of view, right? So she's like that sort of like North Star customer in my head. That's what the team here is all about. But Pet Value has taught me there's another customer, an equally important customer, which is the franchisee, right? And we have to consider it. And I'll give you a use case that we went through that really amplified it and brought this into my memory bank, but also made it institutional enough that now it's become part of all the questions we ask ourselves. So we're going to launch subscriptions. Subscriptions is a hard business because generally it's done with a promotion attached to it. And also there's a sense that most of those subscriptions will go as a direct to customer, which means from a franchisee perspective, you're going to be taking sales out of the store and moving it into the online channel.
Mm-hmm.
And in the online channel, we actually provide the franchisee with a net economic benefit. So there is some money still being traded if the item is into their trade zone.
Right.
But it's not at the same rate, unfortunately, as they would if I had walked into the store, picked up that inventory, and bought that inventory, even if it was a click and collect item itself.
Right.
So we're thinking about subscriptions. We're going down this path. And in my head, as part of the MVP model, I'm like, we're going to launch subscriptions and we're going to launch D2C to start. And our CEO comes back and says, you're not doing that. That's not going to fly. And I'm like, that's how I've been trained this is like MVP model. And he's like, because you're looking at only a single customer. What happens if you look at both the franchisee and the end customer as the devoted pet lover as both customers? Would you do it then? And the answer is no, because now I've really forced a decision to a customer at the expense of the franchisee decision. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is, why don't we do a subscription model and build it where it has both click and collect and a direct to home? And now the devoted pet lover gets to decide, and the franchisee doesn't feel like they've been put offside. Excuse me. So that level of thinking was, now it's a customer choice. The franchisee's saying, you're not forcing somebody down a path, you're letting them choose a path. Small notion of change, but it helps sort of amplify, okay, where do we go? That led to then, let's think about how we test subscriptions now. Do we want to test it with a discount? What can we see?
Mm-hmm.
We started testing it with a 5% discount, pulsing it in just to see what would happen over a course of almost a year. And then we started seeing results. So we started seeing that this customer was actually shopping with us way more. They were actually increasing their total baskets as a lifetime value, as we sort of calculated the lifetime value. So all of these positives started checkboxing and going, hey, this is great. How do we now share this with the franchisee network and say to them, hey, this is what's happening? How do we, where do we go? And we shared it with them, but there's still the apprehension of, hey, you're going to pull sales again from my store. And the thought process was, okay, we also have this click and collect model. Why don't we offer a bigger discount, which is what's normal, on a click and collect purchase? And again, give the customer, the devoted pet lover, the choice. Should they want the convenience of picking it up at their local store, because we are conveniently located, they can do that. And it'll be on the subscription. And if they so choose not to do that, then we'd give them the second level discount, which would be the everyday 5%. And that's what led to sort of this everyday offer now. But it took us a year and a half to get there. But if you think back to that sort of early decision of the end customer and the franchise customer as the thesis of, I need to satisfy both of those pieces. If we didn't solve that problem, we never would have got to where we got today.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, with your hybrid model, it's so important to consider both customers for sure.
Both customers, and then test, right? And ultimately, I don't believe everybody sits there and goes, hey, you're trying to screw me over. I think what we're really trying to do is figure out what's in the best interest of the customer, what's in the best interest of the franchisee, and let those two line up correctly so that we can actually, all of us can be happy to make the money we make and put the money on the table for our friends and family that we continuously do. So in my head, it's when you ask the question of, how is it different? It's different because we have an end customer we have to consider and really put at the forefront of our decision paths. But at the same time, we also have a high regard for, we have to test, learn, and prove it out to a degree where, they can be satisfied and understand it. So it's not as fast as corporate where you can just be like, just do it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? Which is what we're all, so, for a lot of the corporate folks, I'm guilty of it, was put it on the back of the store ace is what I would have called it. Right? It's like, you know what, download the problem. We need to get this thing into the market. Let's make it, yes, it's a pain in the butt for the stores. Just do it.
Yeah.
That's something that we've tried not to do because we know that we're held to a higher regard. We know we have to deliver something better.
Yeah. You've got a few different groups holding you accountable, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, what would you say has been the biggest change or challenge you've had to lead the team through as it relates to e-com at Pet Value?
Yeah, I mean, subscriptions is one that I've talked to you about. I think also the change of platforms, that the journey we went on from taking our existing monolithic platform and moving it to a mock-based platform that we're on today. I think that was a massive challenge that we took on of how do we unwind something that wasn't that old but was really holding us back to
Right.
something much more modern that opened up the gateway for doing even more great things for us, and making that happen, which I think was a huge body of work to be done. And again, very complex, as you know, with any e-commerce launch that happens, but also doing it with, a real hard deadline because of contractual relationships and
Right.
needs. Really put a lot of pressure in. And I think the other piece of the business that we're still trying to solve for is, now how do we build all the marketing connection points, right? We've got this great sort of engine now. Now, how do we start feeding the engine with more automation, more ability to understand more about that personalization journey that we really want to go on, and start testing and leaning into that more and more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, migrating to a new platform is a huge undertaking. How long did that process take you? Just out of curiosity.
That took us just under a year to do that.
Oh, that's pretty good. It's pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I was quite happy. It was quite good. A lot of focus.
So let's talk about trends
Yeah.
and some of the technologies. Like, what are you watching closely right now? I know we spoke about AI earlier. Is there anything else that you've got your eye on?
Anything around personal AI, obviously everybody's on top of, but
Yeah.
there's some simpler things too, right? I'm still on top of the personalization space and trying to understand where we're going to take that next. There's changes. Like, I think one of the questions that just popped up in the chat is like, this is the year of the cat, with cat ownership at its highest and growing faster than dogs. What are you doing online in sort of highlight cat products, stronger cat food, treats, and litter? Where, those are things that are also trends in our business that we're also watching, is cat ownership does change sort of the approach we're taking. Now, dog still outweighs cat in terms of spend and what's happening, but we're very cognizant of, do we have the right cat products? Do we have the right litter? Do we have the right food and treats that are available, and the right education to help support that equally is important. We mentioned the AI piece, and then I also think there's things around where I would call more synergistic type approaches, right? So how do we actually bring more of that in-store experience online? How do we bring some of that online goodness into our stores and make them a little bit more frictionless, a little bit more friendly, is what I would call it.
Amazing. I wonder who decided it was the year of the cat. Do you know where that
I don't know who decided that, but wherever that question came from, they have a good sense of the data, because that is truly, things that we've talked about is there's, especially in a macro environment where things are a bit tougher. Cats are also a much easier gateway into the pet ownership land if you're sort of going from something new to a cat versus something new to a dog. I mean, a dog
Yes.
takes more time, as you know, and I know. A cat's great for companionship, great for fun, but it's also, it's a little bit easier to manage at times as well.
Absolutely. They're definitely more independent, that's for sure.
Correct.
So we're near the end here, Tanbir. So, what do you see as the biggest growth opportunity for Pet Value,
Yeah.
let's say in the next 5 years?
So I think, I think about this one, we still see humanization and premiumization taking place. And when I say premiumization, think of it as people are expecting better quality foods for their pets, similar to how it's happened for babies. And I'll give you an example with my kids. When I had my kids, I remember my wife turning to me being like, we're going to buy organic milk now. And I'm like, well, we've been drinking non-organic milk for all of our lives. Why now are we changing? Like, oh, we have kids. Like, they need the best. And now I look at Levi and I'm like, holy crap, he gets supplements today. And I take no supplements. Like, I don't take any probiotics. I don't take any, like, he gets salmon oil for his skin and coat. I don't know what I take for my skin and coat, but I take nothing really at this point in time. Right. So I still see this level of humanization, premiumization happening. I look at our culinary category, which we had just recently talked about on our earnings call as well, as a growth vector of our business, because people want to feed higher quality, gently cooked, frozen, raw as part of their diet. It does take up more effort. It obviously does also cost a lot more money, but those are the categories that are starting to emerge as, hey, I want to make sure I give the best possible food outcome to my pet because I expect them to live that happy, healthy life. We'll continue to open new stores. That's a big part of it. And then I think part of what, as you open new stores, we definitely are going to be leaning into enhancing our digital capabilities, really around convergence, right? So how do we convert more or converge more around the in-store and the online? How do we get to know you better? So, you know, Tricia, your case, love to know you, but really now I know a lot about Hank, right? So now how do I take what I know about Hank and use it to help you become a better pet parent? Or at least even, you may be an awesome pet parent, but how about I even give you a high five for being a great pet parent? Because sometimes you need that validation or that feeling of, I'm doing it right. Like, that's cool that I've got it down. I'm doing the right stuff at the right time.
That's
Even
amazing.
that's equally important.
You've immersed yourself in this pet category, Tanbir.
I have. I've
Inside out.
almost 5 years here. I feel like, you know, it's been one of sheer joy and love. And then obviously being a pet parent itself, you get a
Yes,
sense of how you become a customer of your own product, you become a customer of your own brand, and you also understand where you're trying to push and pull and tug those emotional strings as well.
absolutely. But I think being a pet parent too just makes it more impactful. I mean, you can bring so much of
Absolutely.
your family life into work and learn from both sides. Um,
Absolutely.
you're actually creating a brand new category, culinary.
Yeah, we are.
That's
So
that's
we
incredible,
framed it as culinary, which is really the raw,
right?
gently cooked and frozen product all mixed together. So,
I just started with Hank on some raw, so I'll have to check out your offering for
yeah,
sure.
please, please do let me know.
We have one more question from LinkedIn.
Yeah.
How do you see print on demand working into your personalization plans?
So great question. We've actually been testing it a little bit as
Hmm.
well in our marketing plans because we do want to see some of that show up. We think there's an element of it. We still struggle with the cost efficiency of scale, unfortunately, with print as well and going there. And part of it also is we still need to see when we print that we get the return on that investment because it does come at a higher cost. So there's other ways that we think we'll test it out and think about it, but it is part of our test and learn strategies because we've been playing with it a bit.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And guess what? We did it. That's the end of our show. Thank
Awesome.
you again so
Fast.
much for joining us. Really
I, know,
appreciate it.
I
Learned so
loved it, and I'm so happy that it happened. Like I said, it's been almost 4 years in the making, is what I think of this as.
Yes, absolutely. And I took up almost an hour of your time, so I really appreciate it. For folks who want to connect with you, where should they reach out?
Best place is LinkedIn. Unfortunately, everyone asks me for an email, but if I give emails out, then I don't respond to all the emails that I do get and I need to get to.
Yeah,
LinkedIn is generally a place, especially for those who are trying to sell me stuff. Please really think about why you want to sell it to us because we have so many people emailing us to sell us stuff. So really think about what I've shared with you today around the personalization, the pet experience, where we want to take it, and really tailor your sales pitch with those in mind versus just a generic sort of, hey, let's connect.
I love that. Offering tips. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tanbir. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Point of Purchase. Please check out geekspeakcommerce.com and follow us on social to see when our next Point of Purchase episode will be available. Tanbir, thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you. And to everybody out there, petvalue.ca is where you can find us always.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.